Hey, what's up, guys and gals? Kyle Johnson here with another episode of The Underwriter's Take. And today we're going to be talking about student loan forgiveness. Stay tuned. Now, in the previous video, I went into why college is so expensive in the first place. And I'll leave a link to that video in the description below if you haven't watched it yet. You should, because we talk about supply and demand fundamentals and why in the heck college is so expensive. But naturally, because college is so expensive and we have a rising number of people going to college, the student debt overhang is outrageous. There's something like 1.6 trillion in student debt, and the number is only getting bigger. Now we have politicians on both the left and the right coming out talking about how they want to deal with this debt problem, and many of them want to be like Oprah in 2004. In all serious, guys, before you go any further, please smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help get this video to more and more people. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. It really helped me out, and I'd very much appreciate it. According to a quick Google search, a whopping 70% of all students take out some form of student debt in order to finance college. Now, before we get into the various plans that are out there, Biden has a plan, Warren has a plan, Bernie's always had a plan for student debt forgiveness. I get it. It's our turn, right? I understand why young people think that student debt forgiveness is something that they deserve. I mean, we've seen the banks get bailed out in 2009 after the great financial crisis. More recently, we've seen companies get bailed out who have mismanaged their finances. Specifically, airlines have used 90 some odd percent of their profits over the last decade to buy back their shares and pay back large bonuses and not save for a rainy day. And now the federal government's giving them billions of dollars. Back in the 90s, we saw hedge funds get bailed out. So I totally understand why, young people today think that it's our turn. And after all, if you were to wipe away the student debt of graduating college students, that would be a boost on the economy, right? Our economy is 70% consumption, and if you free up the personal balance sheets of students who don't have to make debt payments monthly on that student debt, maybe they'll go out and spend money, right? Maybe they'll reach forward into the future and buy that house or buy that car. And also, proponents of student loan cancellation argue that it would help with the wealth and racial gap. Studies have shown that people of color tend to take out larger amounts of student loans because they have less access to familiar wealth, right? They don't have grandparents or parents that they can rely on to help pay for student, college and whatnot. And that is true. But playing devil's advocate, there are also some cons with student loan forgiveness as well. The first thing that comes to mind is making it fair and equitable. The politicians on the left side of the aisle like to use those terms, fair and equitable, and I think it's only fair that they be applied to any sort of student loan forgiveness. While more people have gone to college and are going to college than ever before, still something only like 45% or 44% of graduating high school seniors go to a four-year college, and something like 65% get some sort of post-high school education at all, which means that there's a large chunk of the population, many of whom are going to be on that lower income bracket, that wouldn't get this windfall of student debt forgiveness. So it's hard to make the case that out of the box, writing off student debt is fair and equitable. Next, economists like to point out that if you were to wipe out student debt, that would allow for a lot more spending in the economy, because after all, young people that were strapped by student loan payments would, now have, freed up space to go out and buy new cars and houses and things like that. And while that's true, it's important to understand what that means. It means that it's not that you're getting a $50,000 check in your checking account that you're going to go spend. What economists are really saying is that because that $300 or $400 or $500 monthly student loan payment is gone, we want you to go out and take on more debt. We want you to go out and take on more debt to buy that car or that house or that that new appliance package from Best Buy, and pay on that monthly. So, yes, it would create a short-term economic blip, but in the long term, do we really want people to be in debt? Now, something that my dad always told me was that nothing's free, right? Whether free college, free healthcare, we all have to pay for it somehow. And in the case of broad-based student debt forgiveness, we would all pay for it over the next decade in the form of inflation and also higher taxes. Now, on the inflation front, the whole idea of student debt relief is to get the economy moving and to give young people more money in their pockets to spend. Well, when that happens, velocity of money picks up and the prices of goods and services go up. And on the taxation front, there are plans to tax the rich, implement a wealth tax, this sorts of things in order to pay for it. And that might work in the short term, but it probably won't work in the long term. And my state of California is a perfect example of that. In California, they're raising taxes over and over again on the highest income earners, but increasingly bleeding down into that upper middle class. And what we're seeing now is a mass exodus from California. Businesses, people are voting with their feet and leaving. Now you could argue that can't happen at the federal level because people have to go somewhere. But I think it could, especially when you're talking about taxing the highest earners, because they have the means to actually leave. And while something definitely needs to be done about the high price of college, most of the plans that we've discussed today don't address that, right? They address the personal consumption or the personal balance sheet of the student by wiping out their debt. It does nothing to actually create a system where college becomes more affordable. So I guess what I'm saying is forgiving student debt is treating a symptom of the problem, not the underlying problem itself. And you got to remember, we're in the middle of a recession and a pandemic. So if you were to forgive everybody's student loans, you got to remember that those young people are still trying to find jobs in one of the worst economies we've had. So with this newfound debt forgiveness and bleak job prospects, what if a lot of students just go back to school and go get their master's degrees or a second degree or of some kind? What economic output does that drive in the immediate term? And so if we're going to forgive student debt, I think that the country needs to get something from that investment. So, student loan forgiveness tied to public service or tied to military service or some sort of greater community good might be an idea. But again, it needs to also come with a broader based reform of our college higher education system that needs to attack the root underlying problem, which is that the cost of college is too expensive relative to the value of that degree in the form of the income that students are gonna achieve after college.